Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Sarah Siegel, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I am excited to welcome you to tonight's event with Tovah Feldshuh discussing her book Lilyville Mother, Daughter, and Other Roles I've Played. She is joined in conversation tonight by Marie Brenner. Through virtual events like tonight's, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to our community and our new digital community during these challenging times. Every week, we're hosting events here on Zoom, and as always, our event schedule appears on our website at harvard.com/events, where you can sign up for our email newsletter and browse our shelves from home. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question at any time during the talk today, go to the Q&A button on your screen and we will get through as many as time allows. If you would like to buy a copy of Lilyville, there will be a link in the chat where you can purchase it. All sales through this link support Harvard Bookstore, so thank you for your support of community spaces like your local bookstore. There will also be a link to donate in the chat if you would like to give additional support to Harvard Bookstore. Your purchases and financial contributions make this virtual author series possible, and now more than ever supports the future of a landmark independent bookstore. Thank you for tuning in support of our authors and the incredible staff of booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support now and always. And finally, as you may have experienced in virtual gatherings this past year, technical issues may arise. If they do, we will do our best to resolve them as quickly as possible. Thank you for your patience and understanding. And now I am so pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. Tovah Feldshuh is a six-time Emmy and Tony nominee and has been awarded 3 honorary doctorates of humane letters. Additionally, for her theater work, she has won 4 Drama Desks, 4 Outer Critics Circle Awards, 3 Dramalogues, the Obie, the Theater World, and the Helen Hayes and Lucille Lortel Awards for Best Actress. She has been twice nominated as Best Actress in a Drama in Los Angeles for her work in the play Sisters-in-Law, in which she originated the role of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She is joined tonight by Marie Brenner, whose investigative journalism for Vanity Fair has been generating headlines and powering Hollywood since 1984. Her 2002 investigation into the Enron scandal was referenced to question witnesses testifying before a Senate committee, and her in-depth article on the tobacco wars was one of the most compelling reports in Vanity Fair's history, becoming the basis for the Oscar-nominated film The Insider. Her reporting on war correspondent Marie Colvin's life was adapted into the 2018 major motion picture A Private War, and Donald Trump bestowed upon her the singular honor of saying in one of his books that her 1990 article after the gold rush was, quote, one of the worst stories ever written about him. Tonight, they are discussing Lilyville, which Town and Country notes is a revealing look at family, expectations, and forgiveness, and what it means to perform for audiences of thousands when the voice of one person is all that truly matters, and which Good Morning America calls a must-read for April, and is also the #1 book in parent-child memoirs on Amazon. From Golda to Ginsburg, Yentl to Mama Rose, Tallulah to the Queen of Mean, Tovah Feldshuh has always played powerful women. But offstage, Tovah struggled to fulfill the one role she never auditioned for, Lily Feldshuh's only daughter. Tovah spent her childhood striving for Lily's approval, only to feel as though she always fell short. When Tovah shot to stardom with a Broadway hit, she still did not garner her mother's approval. But after falling in love with a Harvard-educated lawyer and having children, Tovah found it was easier to understand her mother and the sacrifices she had made during the era of the women's movement, the sexual revolution, and the subsequent mandate for women to have it all. In this memoir, Tovah shares the highs and lows of a career that has spanned 5 decades and shares the lessons that she has learned, often the hard way, about how to live a life in the spotlight, strive for excellence, and still get along with your mother. With that, I will turn things over to our speakers. Tovah and Marie, the virtual podium is yours.
Thank you very much.
Sarah, thank you so much. Tovah, how wonderful to be with you tonight on this extraordinary day in American history. I had a script here all ready to ask you, and now I'm going to just toss it out so we can just offer a moment of utter stillness and respect for what has happened today in the George Floyd case. Did you ever think that you would see guilty on all counts in your lifetime on a case like this?
In the words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, justice, justice, justice shall we do. Maybe the world is righting itself. Maybe its tilt is being equalized now. And I'm very grateful that justice was done. We are responsible. We're responsible for our actions. Sad but true.
It's an incredible day to be talking about your mother and your family. Your mother was a woman of the century. She spanned an entire century plus 103 years. She saw everything. The opening of Yankee Stadium. She saw the pandemic, the depression, both world wars. And in your family, 1968, you are just going off to college. There is an atmosphere of constant social ferment and conversation with your father, your brother, who will wind up writing a Pulitzer nominated play, Miss Evers' Boys, about the Tuskegee experiment. I mean, this set the scene for us in Scarsdale in your house in 1968 as all of America is on fire.
Right. So the war was raging in Vietnam, and the boys in Scarsdale had not yet been killed. And then one of our boys was killed, and that was it. My mother and I marched together on Washington. She joined a Sarah Lawrence bus. I was a marshal. I remember had an armband, and we marched together to end this war. And God bless mommy. My father left a new dealer for World War II, and he was lucky enough to be taken out of the infantry and put into the intelligence because he was fluent in German. And he worked under General Dwight David Eisenhower and did not come home till 1946 because Eisenhower, at the end of the war, chose some of his Jewish boys from Harvard and other Ivies, but from Harvard, who were fluent in German and were lawyers, as was my father, to interrogate the German Wehrmacht and the SS and determine who should go to Nuremberg and who shouldn't. So when Daddy came home from the war, though he was a big-hearted, liberal-minded man, he was an Eisenhower soldier. So he became a Republican for a while. My mother remained a Democrat, a staunch supporter of Neil Lowy. I remember my father would go to law office and my mother would throw these luncheons for the Democratic Party. But we marched. So she read the New York Times without glasses. You know, after you get your eyes zapped, she read it without glasses till she died. So that was her morning ritual. So she was up on things, and she was a practical woman, and she was a mother. She didn't want our kids to die. And when it started to hit the upper middle class started to get active. And I think that it's a different world today, Marie, that we're all much more in contact and much
Absolutely.
more
Yeah,
alert.
but she was italicized. You know, I thought when I started reading your extraordinary memoir, Lilyville, that I would be getting a kind of a romp. I would be getting the best of Tovah shtick. It would be funny. All of these things were true. But I didn't know that I would also be getting a book of real feeling that is just filled with family secrets. And that is so tough when you are a memoir writer and you are a first time writer, really, to
Yes.
go for it. Take us into the process of how you decide to write the book, of how you decide to write Lilyville.
There was an agent on a subway, I believe. His name was Albert Lee, and he was listening to, by chance, an interview I did on Entertainment Weekly for Dalton Ross and his partner Jessica. And he got to his office and he called my managers in Hollywood and said, "Does Tovah Feldshuh have a literary agent?" And they said no. And he said, "I think she has a writer's voice." And Albert Lee came here in my apartment to meet me. And he said, "I want to represent you. What do you want to write?" And my mother had recently passed away a few years before. And I said, "I want to write about my mother. I want to write a TV series about my mother." He said, "Later, later. What do you want to write? We want you to write a book." "Well, I've never written a book." "I want to write a memoir about my mother." "Well, there has to be some elements of your career." I said, "Well, what if it's not a celebrity autobiography? After all, I'm not Tom Cruise. I'm not Sophia Loren. I'm not an international entity. What if it's about my life through the eyes of my mother and my mother's life through my eyes?" And we were 40 years apart, 2 generations. That is not a generation gap. That is a generation chasm. And I I suffered plenty in the first 25 years of my life because my mother was not a verbal parent. She was a mitzvah girl. She was the good deed woman. That's how she showed love. She did good things for good people, kind things for everybody she could, but she wasn't very verbal for my brother or myself, so much so that I would ask David, how do we even know mommy loves us? And my brother would say, because mommy is always there. But it created a black hole of silence and emptiness in me that I paid for. In all events, I wrote my first manuscript, and my editor looked at it and said, the stories are fantastic. It's not a book. I said, what do you mean it's not a book? It's not a book. It's not hanging together. The pearls are on the coffee table, but they're not strung. And then I got this idea along with my colleague, Jeff Harner, who was my director for my one-woman cabaret shows and concerts, Tova is Leona, where I play Leona Helmsley, and Aging is Optional, because God, I hope it is. He said, what do you know best? And I said, I know the theater best. That's how I was originally trained. He said, write from what you know. Write it as a theater piece. And with Jeff in the virtual writing room, along with Oliver Schultz and my wonderful assistant, who I'm sorry to say went to Yale. My apologies, everyone. In all events, I got the idea with them to fashion the book in 3 acts with 2 intermissions. Instead of chapters, I give you scenes. Instead of an introduction, I give you an overture. Instead of exit music, instead of an afterword, I give you exit music. And instead of acknowledgments, I invite everybody who helped me, besides Jeff and Oliver and all my wonderful assistants. The manuscript took 2 years, as you can imagine, was completely revamped, starting in March of last year, completely rewritten. I rewrote it as a theater piece, and then the world complied. COVID hit, and where the hell else is an actor supposed to go? So I sat and wrote and wrote and wrote and tried out line after line in front of Jeff and Oliver, and they would help hone my skills as a writer, my voice, and the theatrical structure of the piece. They would clarify. Also, Oliver happens to be a linguistics major from Yale, so he knew where every comma should go. They saved Hachette a lot of legwork in the grammar.
I've had the joy this week of listening on Audible to you, Tova, and it is a performance of a lifetime. To have you narrating your own history is such a joy to listen to. And as I hear the book, it is your greatest one-woman show ever done. So you made this incredible decision to write it as a performance, which was so engaging. And you open on a trapeze.
Yes.
And without any spoilers, because the book is so filled with so many incredible stories, just take us into the moment when your telephone rings and it is Barry Weissler.
Right. So my phone rings and the ID says on the phone, Barry Weissler. And I say to myself, Broadway producer Barry Weissler, I guess I'll pick it up. And he says, Tova, we want you to do Pippin for us on Broadway. Why don't you come down to the Music Box Theater and play on the trapeze? We'd like to see if trapeze is part of your world. And I'm thinking to myself, trapeze part of my world? Are you kidding me? So I bike down to the Music Box Theater, and that is my audition, mind you, playing on a trapeze. I walk in the stage door. I swear on Lily and Sydney's grave, I am hoisted 30 feet in the air on a trapeze, no belt, no safety belt, no mat, no insurance, and I'm hanging from the rafters of the Music Box Theater, and Barry Weissler screams up to me, Tova, 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 are you scared, scared, scared? And I realize in that moment, because I had a swing set in Scarsdale that had 2 swings and a pedal pusher and a little metal trapeze that I would hang on as a 3-year-old, upside down in my green snowsuit in the winter, and upside down in my brother's hand-me-down brown shorts with no shirt on. I don't think I put a shirt on until I was 9. But I realized in that moment that I wasn't afraid. So I said, no, no, no. Are you? And I got that part as the grandmother Bertha and Pippin without singing or dancing a note, because I could play on a trapeze. And then I started to take lessons feverishly to get ready for the run. And it was thrilling. It was like being paid to lose weight. I think I weighed 112. I weighed what I weighed in 7th grade doing Pippin on Broadway.
So your mother comes to see you in
Yeah.
Pippin, and give us a little, give us a sketch of Lily Feldshuh as she sees you hanging on the trapeze and what she says.
So the way Diane Paulus structures Pippin, the grandmother, sings no time at all. Oh, it's time to start living. Time to take a little from this world we're given. Time to take time, 'cause spring will turn to fall in just no time at all. So it's all about the cycle of life and the coming of death, if you will. So I do that number, which is a hit number from that show, full out while I'm doing a full out aerial act on the trapeze, complete. And if you do what's required of the part, you will stop the show. And I did, and I certainly did that day. I got an ovation and the show stopped. And after the show, I went to my mother, because, so proud. I said, Mommy, how did I do? And she said, Tovah, that you should still have to earn a living like this, and on a trapeze yet. And that was my mother. She didn't give an inch. And there were other stories like that. I took her to hair, and there was a real hair-raising story at the end of Act 1. I'll share it with you. At the end of Act 1, Will Swenson, the lead in Hair, comes out and straddles. They have to straddle an armrest of an audience member. They straddle my mother's armrest. And he is over my mother like the Arch of St. Louis in his loincloth. So my mother's in a little St. John knit with a little bit of pearls on, and her little gloves and her matching purses in her lap. And she looks up and she looks down and she looks up under him. And as the house lights come up, I go, Mommy, how did you like Act 1? She said, like it? I haven't had sex like this since Daddy died. Welcome to Lilyville, where my mother, Lily, reigns supreme.
Well, Lilyville is an extraordinary place. I mean, I think of this wonderful moment where you start auditioning for the first time when you were little and rehearsing in your bathroom. So, and where would that show open, Tovah? And tell us who was in the audience.
It really started opposite my mirror in my room. We lived in Quaker Ridge in Scarsdale, so of course I had a Quaker room. It was red, white, and blue with like Quaker people on it, and Terry Sue. I still have it on the enamel of the light switch, and I look into the mirror, and the first thing I said is, "Are you real? Do you really exist?" And it wasn't a sad thing. It was like, "Do I exist?" I was so little, and then I would rehearse, different voices and little things, and then I would take my show. When I got courage, I would tour it to the bathroom, shut the door, have a lot of privacy, get up on the stool. I had to go on a step stool to see the mirror, and then finally I toured it to the living room for my opening night and debut it to the fans, my father and my mother. And that's where my alternate universe started to exist. And I think some of it honestly started to exist because of my mother never saying she loved me. So I needed to create an environment that I could control.
But as a performer at age 4 or 5, as you're open from the bathroom to the living room, you sensed what was happening. You had one parent,
Yep.
your father, and
Yep.
He
was unconditional love, a heart as big as Texas.
cheering madly, and your mother looking at you like.
And I would come visit them from Sarah Lawrence. First of all, I wanted to go to Vassar. I was accepted to Vassar. But my mother said, "Who's going to teach acting up in Poughkeepsie?" This was after I said, "I'd really like to go to Juilliard." And she said, "You're not going to a trade school. If you're going to be an actor, get an education first. Do something with your mind." So obviously acting to her was like somewhere over to the left. It was a speck of dust. So anyway, I'd come in to see them from Sarah Lawrence, which wasn't far away from Scarsdale. And the reason she didn't want me to go to Vassar is because you had to get to Vassar via the Taconic Parkway, and that had the highest mortality rate in the 60s and 70s. It was dangerous. And of course, Sarah Lawrence was in Bronxville, very close to the city, and she bribed me with, "You might be able to study at one of those studios, and they'll give you credit." So I came to visit them, and I would walk in the door. I go, "Hi, I'm home." And my father would say, "She's home, Lily. She's home. She's coming in. She's home." And my mother would say, "What's she wearing?" And I had this tremendous dichotomy, and I survived, and I didn't really fully realize my mother's not only power in the strength of my life, but she really helped me create resilience. Because when the going got rough, I already had the rough. I already had the rough in the early part of my life from that lack of verbal expression from my mother. And there is an Eastern European tradition, I don't think it's just Jewish, that you do not praise your child lest they become too proud, lest they have hubris and they are struck down by the gods. It's why the Jewish, and I'm sure other peasant groups in Eastern Europe, tie red ribbons around the crib and red ribbons on the stroller so that the devil will think he's already been there and pass over it. So there was an ethos about not praising your child too much, and maybe that's part of America too. I don't know, but it certainly existed from my
And
mother.
your mother comes from such a particularized background. Researching her life, you found extraordinary aspects. Give us a sense of who she was from her, being born on the kitchen table, and take us through.
Well, she was born April 18th, 1911, on the dining room table at 1534 Charlotte Street, the third of four, what would be four sisters of Ada Kaplan, who was British. She was British. She talked like this. It wasn't the Queen's English. It was kind of British Jewish, if you know what I mean. And from my grandpa Gershon, he was from Minsk, Gubernia. He talked like this. He talked like this. And I think early in her life, she must have been brought up with great caution and had imbibed the fears of her parents, who crossed the waters for a better life in America. They lived on 17th and 2nd. My Aunt Rose got pneumonia, and they said, if you want to save this little girl's life, you have to go to the country. So they moved to the Bronx. And the Bronx at that time were wildflowers and roller skating, and you could see the horizon. And they lived in a floor through of a brownstone, and Papa and Mama both sewed. And my grandmother was a seamstress. My grandfather cut clothes. And my grandmother couldn't go to work in 1911 in March because she was 9 months pregnant with my mother, who would be born April 18th. And that was the day of the Triangle Factory fire.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, the
So
drama here. Yeah.
right. It was, my mother was brought up with fear. And I'm not saying I absolutely know this. This is what I intuit from my upbringing from her, because her upbringing, don't ever open a door for anybody, don't talk to strangers. When I wanted to go to Times Square with my boyfriend for New Year's Eve, she took my hair and put it over my face. She's, good, you go like this, you go like this, you're too pretty, I don't want anybody to touch you. So we were, I was brought up with near my father with a sense of adventure and embracing life. And my father really knew death. His father died when he was 16, and he knew death from World War II. So when he got back from World War II, my brother was already 2 years old, and I became his first infant in the 50s, and it was a love affair. He didn't take a day for granted, not a day. And she became much more like him when he died. She gave him the light. Her destiny was her match. That's what a woman was defined at, what kind of match she would make for herself in marriage.
And yet your parents had an extraordinary love affair.
Yes,
I love how they met.
yes, they they both got into NYU at 16 years old. So my father was a year older than she, and her locker was next to Sylvia Feldshuh, who was going to go to law school. That was pretty fancy in 1927. I mean, pretty brainy. And one day Sylvia came to the stranger who had her locker literally right next to her and said, have you seen my brother? And my mother said, who's your brother? And then my mother got a gander of who her brother was, and she used to call him Rudolph Valentino. And she convinced her girlfriend, Cappy, who wanted to ask Sidney Feldshuh to the Sadie Hawkins dance, and she said, Cappy, he's not for you, he's not for you. You should ask this person. And then she asked Sidney, and that's how they met, and their alliance was 63 years of marriage after 5 years of courting. So they were together for 68 years.
So I have to ask you, in my unofficial role of armchair psychiatrist. You're born after the war. Your father adores you. You are his Terry Sue, and you have to tell us about that name. And he just infuses you with so much unconditional love, which they say is the secret to all women's success, when you have that adoring father who gives you so much moxie. Is it possible that your mother felt a little bit jealous that your father was just so Terry Sue loving?
I think it's highly possible. I also think first of all, she sublimated herself to Sydney, who was called Sonny by his mother. And I call Brandon, Harvard, Harvard College and Harvard Business School, who I call Brandon our son. I call him my sunny son. So he was the sun around which the planets revolved. That was the first thing of her place in the universe as a person born in 1911 and eloping with my father secretly while he was still at Harvard so they could sleep together because my mother was a virgin until the first day they got married. They eloped on January 28th, 1933, lived together for 2 years, announced their engagement, and got married publicly at the San Moritz on June 14th, 1935. So she had the role of a woman. Her mother had been in corsets. You know, she was already 9 years old when the first little black dress showed up and the Roaring Twenties showed up. And the other thing is, I think maybe she wished that he treated her the way he treated me. I knew, I felt I had won the Freudian race, but I didn't realize at that time how much easier it is to love our children unconditionally than it is to love our mates. That's an art form, and I'm just lucky to
Mm.
be married to Andrew Harris Levy. But that's something you work at, and it's fluid and it changes. And whereas your children, you die for them. So I
And
just
another Harvard lawyer. I mean, and your father, as you're growing up, your father is arguing in these amazing cases in court, and he often takes you with him to
yep.
hear his closing arguments. And tell us a little bit about that, because
He even took
birth
us.
of the performer.
It First of all, sometimes we go out for Chinese food and then we go to night court. My father would sit on the bench with the pro bono lawyers and try to defend people. But then I would come to court. He took us to Washington, D.C. when he had a case at the Supreme Court. And I don't think I was allowed in the courtroom in session, but I was in the Supreme Court, walking in the hall holding my mother's hand while my father was trying a case. And more than that, he would come home and he would regale us with his stories at the law office. And very often my mother would have to wait for him to come home, and he would get on the last train when he had to write a brief. And those were late nights, but he used to come home on shift number 2. She made two shifts of dinner a night, 6:30 for David and me, and then she'd wait for my father, go pick him up with Jack Daniels on the rocks and Velveeta cheese and Fritz crackers for his happy hour, his cocktail hour, as she drove him home in the Chrysler. There were no Mercedes, and there were no Japanese cars in the 50s in Scarsdale. People stuck with American products because we had just recuperated from the war. Uh, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that was part of the problem. Whatever it was, I did not feel my mother's love. And that, I wouldn't say it scarred me, but it made a huge impression on me, and things started to straighten out. First of all, when I finally met Andy, but don't forget, Andy was after Yentl. I was already on the marquee. I already had 5 awards on
Yes.
Broadway, and I have a mother that comes to me March 20th, 1977, and says, "You can do whatever you want now." And I'm thinking, she's thinking, "Oh, television, movies, Hollywood." She said, "You're marrying a Harvard lawyer." That was, it was
You
the
you had
throw.
you had taken the line from her playbook, right? I
That's right.
mean,
I had
think
followed her.
about Sylvia Plath's great line, my mother, I haven't another. So now, now this is a perfect moment to ask you about the extraordinary range of characters that you have dug deep into that soul and that universe of creating alternate worlds to create.
That's
So
right.
I'm going to just throw out a few of your most memorable, amazing people. Let's start with, of course, Golda Meir.
Golda Meir.
How did you do it?
Well, first of all, having changed my name from Terry Sue to Tovah, thanks to the grace of Michael Fairchild, my boyfriend, in 1968, who said, "What kind of a name is Terry Sue for a girl like you? You're from the North, and you must have had another name. What else were you called?" I said, "I was called Tovah in Sunday school," because I was embarrassed to say Tovah in Hebrew school. Everybody was busy assimilating. We were the only conservative family at Quaker Ridge. I was the only bat mitzvah in my whole grade at Quaker Ridge. Well, there were only 50 of us, but There weren't, people were busy with Brooks Brothers and being American, being American. Um, in all events, by the time I changed my name to Tovah Feldshuh and hit New York, the state of Israel fell on my head and my perceived value tilted. And Shakespeare says, "What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." And I say, that is not true. Everything's in a name. It's a shortcut. It's a shortcut to unfortunately or not type a person. And with a Tovah Feldshuh, I was considered Orthodox, Israeli, foreign, and an expert in Judaism. I was none of that. I was a cheerleader at Quaker Ridge School, but I was a good student. And when I got Yentl, which I auditioned for, it then led to Holocaust. It in Dreyfus in Rehearsal, I played Lucy Dreyfus, Alfred Dreyfus's wife, in an unsuccessful play. And by the time I was offered Golda Meir, it was a clear offer. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a clear offer. Naomi Bunch, where's the bathroom? Where's the bathroom? I need to find the bathroom. Tell me that you have a bathroom in this hovel I call home, right? So Naomi Bunch, another Jewish mother.
An interviewer asked you the other night, was that based on your mother? And you Rachel Bloom's mother, but not without some commonality of do a little bit more. It's such incredible, those lyrics.
Well, it is, because the mother is trying to fix her. And that's what happened with us. My mother tried to fix us to, quote, keep us safe. That was my path into forgiveness for her, to keep us safe. But she was fixing. So if you're always fixing a child, the subliminal message is, you're not good enough. You're not right enough. So this marriage to Andy was her first liberation, that, oh my God, Tovah's settled. And I had an aunt of Andy's, of whom I'm very fond, and she came up to me and she said, when are you going to stop this stuff with the theater? And it was an interesting thing. I said, never, never. I told Andy when we married that I would never leave my work and that he shouldn't marry me. He should marry. He said, go back to marry a teacher at Radcliffe. He said, Mary, I'm just asking you out for coffee. That was her first date. He would ask me to marry him 4 months later, and I said, of course. But Andy has really respected the fact that I need a vacation from my life. It's probably, I've never said this before, it's probably an early imprinted behavior pattern from my early life. I never realized that really being in the theater started with the mirror, but it's the alternate universe, so that I don't have to be with the Tovah problems. I can be with the Golda problems. You, as an empathic person, with the George Floyd problem and solution, the tragedy of that and the solution. So I was able 8 times a week at 6:30 at night to begin to step into the joys, the ecstasies, the triumphs and the defeats of other human beings, including RBG. And RBG, I was with her in chambers, and I said, Madam Justice, how do you want to be remembered? I'm going to be depicting you in a play. It's making its Los Angeles debut. She said, I just want them to know I'm funny. I said, okay, we'll do our best.
She was funny.
She was
had
funny.
A fabulous sense of humor.
Yeah, she was remarkable and incredibly generous, and allowed me to be with her so I could study her and capture her posture. That was a feat in and of itself, her posture.
The other night, Viola Davis was interviewed, and she talked about the rage rocket she had, my words, not hers, to become an actress and what that took. And I immediately thought of what you went through at the Guthrie Theater, because it wasn't exactly, your ascent, Tovah, has been a real zigzag and a portrait of gut-wrenching tenacity and killer desire to become who you became. Can you tell us just a bit about what happened to you at the Guthrie?
So I got the McKnight Fellowship. First of all, I got on the waiting list at Harvard Law because I wanted to be with my dad, and I only wanted to be with my dad if I went to one law school. And they said, forget it, waitlisted. Nobody lifted a finger. And at the same time, per my brother David's suggestion, I applied for the McKnight Fellowship in acting, and I got it. And 3M paid for my master's, paid for me to be a journeyman at the Guthrie Theater. I carried spears and understudied all the leading ladies who were size 6 and size 8, Roberta Maxwell, and at that time, Diane Weiss, who was a feather. And I can tell you, in my small parts at the Guthrie, Michael Langham I had one line in Cyrano. It was the first line I would speak on a professional stage as an equity actor. And it was, but 100 men against one poor poet. Why? It was the line of a little actress. So I said the line, but 100 men against one poor poet. Why? And he said, louder. I said, okay. But 100 men against one poor poet. Why? He went, louder. But 100 men against one poor poet. Why? And he said, now I can hear you, but I can't understand you. And that was topped when I did Oedipus for him and played a leper who would lose her baby. And I had to scream, and I screamed, and he said, you're not going to do that, are you? I said, well, whatever you want me to do, Mr. Langham. He said, I want you to turn your back to the audience because I can't watch you.
Oh my God, Tovah. I mean, Lily prepared you, however, in some way for this.
Prepared me to survive, and David was there. But I feel that kind of cruelty, where you don't have an even ground of
Yes.
a playing field, where there's a bully, where there's a real bully based on his own pain. And I wasn't old enough to do psychiatric work of the whys of Michael Lang, but he was cruel, and he shamed me, and he shamed me in public, as did John Hirsch in Midsummer Night's Dream. So after I did my monologue as Peas Blossom, over hill, over dale, through a bush, through a bar, she said, you really want to be an actor? Why don't you just become, if you're going to do it like that, why don't you just become an insurance agent? So I was, I was extremely lonely, unhappy, but I got lucky. My brother was in the company, and he was my solace. And also at that young age, I was very pretty, and the boys liked me. I was very successful with choosing the person I wanted to be with. So, and I was a very good student, so my grades were very good at University of Minnesota. But wow, I had to get out of there, and I got out of there. I got out of there, and my change your place, change your luck. My luck completely changed when I went to New York City, and all the things that were not prized at the Guthrie at that time, like being able to sing and dance. Did very well.
And all this time that you make your rise, you've got your mother in the backstory. And then there's a moment, giving you that sort of, same static. But now you make a change with her, and take us into that I see that we're getting a couple of questions that we would
I'll get it quick. The first change was marrying Andy Levy. That, March 20th, 1977, that set her heart more peacefully. Then we would go to Hollywood and come back, etc. The second change was becoming a mother. She was a mother, and I began to understand her. But when I turned 40, my mother turned to me and said, how much longer are you going to blame me? And she was 80. And I said, not another moment. And I just chose it. I willed it so that she was the only mother I had, and she gave me my life. She gave me my life.
And then there was a moment where you gave her life. She's 95.
She was 95.
She's in a hospital bed, dying.
She was dying of aortic stenosis at White Plains Hospital, a palliative, wonderful hospital. And my brother said, she's going to die here. And that was collaborated by a young female physician when we had to have her birthday party in the hospital, and they wouldn't even let her leave the room because they were afraid she would expire. They said they're doing medical experiments at Columbia Presbyterian, Milstein Heart Hospital. Your mother, maybe they can do a valvuloplasty on your mother. Your mother may stroke out, but she won't die of drowning. Aortic stenosis is when the aorta can't push the blood back into the system, and it splashes back into the heart and lungs, and you drown. It's pretty lousy. So we got her down to Columbia Presbyterian. Alan Schwartz, head of cardiology, said, Mrs. Feldshuh, if you'd come to us 90 days before, we couldn't have helped you. We're in stage 1 experimentation for the replacement of your aortic valve without an operation, a percutaneous aortic valve replacement. And we think we have an 80% chance of saving your life. And my mother went, otherwise, she said, your condition is fatal. So she said, death, experiment. I'll take experiment. So she was patient number 13, stage 1 experimentation, and she was to have the procedure. They put 5 stents in her heart to strengthen the blood flow. She was to have the procedure on June 28th, which was the day that Andy asked me to marry him in 1976. And I got a call on June 13th, your mother is dying. We have to go in tomorrow. And that would be June 14th, which was the day that she married Sidney Feldshuh on the roof of the San Moritz.
You even invented.
Yeah.
And she was the oldest, and then didn't she have some incredible line? It was she was getting a pig, was it a pig, a sort of a
She got the valve of a pony. She got a pony valve
pony.
that early, and she came through the operation, the procedure. She survived because nothing else was sick, and that's very important to remember. You have 50% less chance of surviving the table if you are obese or if you have a sick kidney, sick liver. She was well. She had a good pancreas. Everything else was fine, even at 95. So she survived, and she was given the valve of a pony. She says, I got the valve of a pony. I guess I'm as strong as a horse. And then, and then she would live for another 8.5 years, breaking all records. And she got the Courageous Patient Award from 5,000 cardiologists down in the Washington Convention Center. And she said in her speech, she got up. She said in her speech she was 100 at that time. She got up and said, "Doctors, you did such a good job. I don't know how I'm going to die. You got any suggestions?" So that was one of her lines. She was remarkable. And she
was that the night she said that she should have been an actress?
That was her 103rd birthday at the Metropolitan Club on Fifth Avenue. She did a vaudeville act with her lines. She had the punchlines. David did the setup lines, which were shown to her because my mother was quite deaf by that time. And when she finished, she said, I'm not afraid of anything. I should have been an actress. I would have loved it. I'm not scared of anything. And that's where I got the insight in Lilyville that she must have been terribly scared as a young kid. And 10 weeks later, she was not even scared of dying. And she left her body. And she had a great life, and she had a great death. And she did what any good parent would do. The last thing my mother taught me was she taught me how to die. She taught me what it looks like and what it means to die. And I don't think we have much to be afraid of. You just want to hope you fall off a cliff like she did. Cerebral hemorrhage. So you're good, you're alive, then that's what I'm hoping for when my time comes.
I can't wait to see this series, Tovah. I wanted to just mention that Adrienne Rich wrote a poem in which she said, at 45, you put your arm into your sleeve and your mother's hand comes out. And you're now going to have a chance to play what will be your greatest role, Lily.
For sure.
Let's take a few questions. Okay, Tovah, this is from anonymous attendee. What character what character have you played that is closest to your mother?
Well, not Golda. Though Golda was an observer learner and my mother was quiet and an observer learner. She would suck in information and then come to a conclusion. What character did I play that's closest? Certainly
That's a good question.
Yentl is Peter Pan. That's Peter Pan the Jew. There's a big, trying to think of what's closest. Oh, Bubby Kantrowitz in A Walk on the Moon. Lillian Kantrowitz, who it was called The Blouse Man originally, but it was with Viggo Mortensen, Diane Lane, and Liev Schreiber, all remarkable artists, directed by Tony Goldwyn. And this mother intuits everything. She says, "You're stooping the blouse man, aren't you?" Diane Lane says, "You're stooping." He says, "It's my curse. It's my curse. I know everything. I figure everything out." So the day I lost my virginity, I don't think this is in the book. My mother said, "I had this terrible, terrible dream last night that you lost your virginity." I said, "What are you talking about? Are you out of your mind?" And it was an April Fool's Day, incidentally. It was a perfect day for me to lose my virginity because it was a foolish thing and not such a great experience. And in all events, but now I'm playing Dr. Ruth, so everything will be great experience sexually, I'm sure. So I think that Bubby Kantrowitz, Lillian Kantrowitz in The Walk on the Moon was the closest I got. And the playing in Kissing Jessica Stein, playing Judy Stein in that piece where my father had just died was peering into the future of who I would be, which is a mother who expands her tent for the love of her children, which we are now, Marie, in an expanded tent requisite in this country. And
absolutely.
And
here is another question from another Toby Taub. Hi, Tovah. When and where will you be performing the Dr. Ruth play, Sending Love and Hugs? Much mazel tov on Lilyville.
Thank you very much. Buy the book for everybody you love for Mother's Day. I will be going to California to go into rehearsals with David Ellenstein at a beautiful theater, North Coast Repertory Theater, and I'll be filmed on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of May, but then I'm coming back east and I'm going to do it in the Hamptons at Bay Street for 25
Oh,
performances for the month
thrilled.
of June. So
Oh, that's
please come.
fantastic.
And then hopefully,
Tova, show us the book jacket so everyone will know what to look for in the bookstore.
thank you. This was taken December 8th. I was at my bat mitzvah. That's my mother and I at my bat mitzvah. My dress was from Bonwit Tellers. Hers was custom made. We're in the living room at Scarza.
And if you want to get the book through the Harvard bookstore, which we hope you will, because we are at a full Harvard family here, and Lily is felling that her daughter is at Harvard tonight. Click the links below if you would like to make this purchase. Okay, here's two more questions from an anonymous attendee. Was your mother ever encouraging of your ambition?
No, that's a pretty easy answer. No, 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 nope.
No, but what
Came
Sarah,
from
even when she told you, what does Vassar know about acting, go to Sarah Lawrence?
that was a crumb, which was great. But I mean, in terms, she didn't fight me. She just remained silent. And she did say, what did I do to have two kids in the theater? You know, my brother became a director and then the head of theater at Cornell. And he's also an emergency room medical doctor. So we call him Dr. Dave. My mother called him God.
And was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for Miss Evers' Boys.
He did. My father, I was in Yentl. We were rehearsing at the Walnut Street Theater. Mo Septi was producing along with Victor Potamkin. I thought Mo Septi was in the back of the house watching me during a 5-hour tech. And I walked up the aisle to say hi to my producer, and it wasn't Mo Septi. It was my father, Sidney Feldshuh. He had done business in Philadelphia. Maybe he was in the courts. I don't know. Maybe he met a client. And instead of taking the train back to his office, he stopped by the Walnut Street Theater and he stayed the afternoon. So that was whenever I get scared, even now, I put 1,000 Sydneys in the black velvet of a house. I put 1,000 Sydneys. And the truth is, the book has a very happy ending because we were two separate trees. You know, there's a Persian saying that says a branch in order to bear fruit must learn to bend. So we had these two separate trees and eventually we bowered, my mother and I, our branches intertwined, and she gave me tremendous wisdom and, as we say in Hebrew, koyach, strength. I remember she used to go, when things were bad, she'd go, remember who you are. She'd hit me on my chest, remember who you are. But if I wanted a career, I had to do it on my own, including financially, which I did.
Another question. Is there anything you've left out of your book that you wish you could go back and add in?
No, but my next book should be Sydneyville. I didn't write him first because there wasn't enough conflict, you know. Is there anything? There are secrets. There are secrets that will be revealed in the television series. We will go beyond Lilyville in the television series.
And the final question, do you have a favorite movie you watch when you're having a bad day?
Isn't that incredible? It used to be a movie, but now television dominates the stardom of many artists. You know, recently, of course, I watched Schitt's Creek because it makes me laugh. And I do notice that as I get older, I vote for the Oscars. It's a great honor. And I was voting last night. I stayed up till 3 to see all the documentaries, some of the shorts. As you get older, it is much harder to see the sadder things than the happier things. And I said to my mother, Mommy, how do you do this? How do you live so long? She said, easy, chocolate and laughter on a daily basis.
A wonderful place to stop. Tovah, thank you so much. Congratulations on Lilyville. Hold it up again or Dr. Ruth will be upset. Hold it up.
Here we go. Here's Lilyville, and here are all my roles you see that I will talk about there. Even Katharine Hepburn. All right, so there you go. Lilyville, mother, daughter, and other roles I've played.
Marvelous. Thank you so much, Tovah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tova and Marie, for your time. And thank you all for tuning in and showing up for authors, publishers, indie bookselling, and our incredible staff here at Harvard Bookstore. If you would like to support Tova and the bookstore, as Marie mentioned, click the link in the chat to purchase Lilyville. We sincerely appreciate your support. Thank you so much and have a great evening, everyone.